Hey everyone, this is going to be problem number 18 on your review. And the first problem, number 18, says 2 minus I to the fifth divided by I to the third. All right, and we're told to just simplify this. So we can't have, remember, I is equal to square root of -1. And if we have a square root in the bottom in our denominator, that's just not in the simplest form. So we're going to get rid of that. And we're going to do it by multiplying by the conjugate of I to the third, which is -I. And if I multiply on the bottom, I have to also multiply it by the top. So I'm going to go ahead and multiply that by the top also, because this whole form, -1 over I to the third over -1 over I to the third, is really just another way of saying 1. So we're really just multiplying by 1. Okay, so let's go ahead and multiply I to the third times -I to the third. I to the third power is the same as I times I times I. And we have another I to the third power, which is I times I times I. But this one has a negative in front of it, so we actually have -1 I to the sixth. All right, so let's think about what this -1 I to the sixth is. Let's talk about I. I to the first power is just I. I to the second power is the same as square root of -1 times square root of -1, which equals -1. I to the third power is going to be I squared times I, and that's going to be -1 times I. And then I to the fourth is going to be I squared times I squared, which is -1 times -1, which is +1. All right, so I have I to the sixth. So now once we have the first four, we can just start repeating again. So we have 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Okay, so I to the sixth is the same as I squared, and I squared is -1. So we're going to change I to the sixth to be -1. So I have -1 times a -1 is equal to a +1. So I to the third times -I to the third equals +1. Okay, so now we've got our denominator taken care of. Now we just have to distribute our I to the I third to the 2 and the -5. So I'm going to rewrite it over here. 2 minus I to the fifth times -1 I to the third. Okay, so when I multiply that, 2 times -1 is -2 I to the third minus, and this would be a plus a -1, and a -1 is actually a +1. And then we have I to the eighth. Okay, so let's figure this out. So what is -2 I to the third? Well, let's look at our I to the third over here. And I'll just highlight it a little bit so we can see better. Here's I to the third, and we said I to the third is equal to -1I. So let's go ahead and put in -2 times -1I. All right, -2 times -1 is +2I. All right, and that's all we can do there. So let's look at 8, okay? So to find 8, we're going to go 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. So I to the fourth is equal to 1. Okay, I to the fourth is equal to 1. So what we really have is 1 times 1 is 1. So our final answer is going to be 2I plus 1. All right, so there's your final answer for that one. Okay, let's stop with that. Okay, next I'm going to do problem number 19. 19 says 5 minus 4I, and that's times 1/10 minus I. All right, so there's our problem for number 19. Let's just, all we're going to do is FOIL our first terms. 5 times 1 over 10 is 5 over 10. 5 times -I is plus a -5I. -4I times 1 over 10, -4I over 10. And then negative 4i times negative 4i is positive 4i squared. All right, so we want to just group our like terms together. So let's deal with these two because we just have one i's on here. So first thing I'm going to do is reduce my 4 by 2. So 2 goes into 4 2 times, 2 goes into 10 5 times. So I'm left with negative 5i minus 2 over 5i. Now I need, before I can add, I need to have a common denominator. So I'm going to multiply 5 over 5 by both. That's basically just multiplying by 1. So that gives me negative 25i over 5 minus 2i over 5. And that gives me negative 27i over 5. All right, so that's part of our problem. Now let's look at this I squared. Remember, I equals square root of negative 1. So I squared equals square root of negative 1 times square root of negative 1. And that happens to equal negative 1. So instead of I squared, we're going to say 4 times negative 1. So that's going to equal negative 4. So now I have 5 over 10 plus negative 4. Well, I can reduce 5 over 10. 5 goes into 5 one time, 5 goes into 10 two times. So I have 1/2 plus a negative 4. I still need a common denominator. I'm going to let that one be 2. Okay, so I'm going to multiply 2 on the top and 2 on the bottom of here. So I end up with 1/2 plus negative 8 over 2. All right, and negative 8 plus 1 equals negative 7 over 2. So my final answer is going to say negative 7 over 2 minus 27i over 5. And there is your answer. Okay, the last problem I'm going to do for you is number 20. And number 20, the problem says, let's see, we have 5 plus I over 2 minus 4i. 2 minus 4i. Okay, so what I need to do, just like before when we did number 18, I'm going to multiply. I don't want to have an I in my denominator, so I need to multiply something to get rid of that I. And what I'm going to multiply is the conjugate. So my conjugate is going to be 2 plus 4i. Okay, so make sure you understand what the conjugate is. Now, if I multiply 2 plus 4i on the bottom, I also must multiply 2 plus 4i on the top. Okay, so let's deal with our top number first. We're going to go ahead and FOIL this. So 5 times 2 is 10. All right, and 5 times 4i is plus 20i. And then I times 2 is plus 2i. And then I times 4 is 4 plus 4i squared. All right. And when we add all of our like terms together, remember I squared now. I equals square root of negative 1. So I squared equals square root of negative 1 times square root of negative 1, which is negative 1. So this is the same as saying 4 times negative 1, which is the same as negative 4. So I have a negative 4 and a positive 10, so that equals 6. And now I just have to add my two like terms together. 20i plus 2i is 22i. And that is the solution to your problem. Okay, this is problem 17. It says Faye threw a basketball from the basketball court toward the hoop. The quadratic equation that models the path of the ball is following. All right, right there. If the hoop is 10 feet high, how long is the ball in the air before the ball goes through the hoop? So when it says how long, we're talking about time, t. Okay, so we're going to solve for t. And so our p of t is going to be how high it is. Okay, so we're going to actually say 10 equals negative 16t squared plus 20t plus 6. So since I want to solve for t, I know if I can set my equation to 0, then I can solve my t. So let's subtract 10 from both sides, minus 10. And that leaves me with 0 equals negative 16t squared plus 20t minus 4. Okay, that looks like a pretty nasty equation to work with. So I'm going to just do a little bit of work here. I'm going to divide everything by negative 4. Negative 4, negative 4, and negative 4. So when I do that, I end up with 0 equals 4t squared plus negative 5t plus 1. Okay, so that's a little bit easier, and still when I look at this, I don't see any easy way to factor. I don't see any easy things to do, so I'm going to go ahead and use my quadratic equation. X equals negative b plus or minus the square root of b squared minus 4ac all over 2a. All right, so let's just fill it in. X equals negative b, and b is 5, so we're going to say negative 5 plus or minus the square root of b squared, negative 5 squared, b squared minus 4ac, so I'm going to say plus negative 4 times a, which is 4, times c, which is 1, all over 2 times a, which is 4. Okay, so now that I have that, I'm going to come over here. Negative and negative makes a positive, so I'm going to have positive 5 plus or minus. Okay, this is 25. Now remember, always keep your parentheses around the negative 5. This number will never be negative. It's always going to be positive. So we're going to have 25 plus 4 times 4 is 16 times 1, so it's going to be plus a negative 16, which is 9. So 5 plus or minus square root of 9 over 8. Now I know square root of 9 is 3, so I'm going to say 5 plus or minus 3 divided by 8. So 5 plus 3 is 8 divided by 8, and 5 minus 3, which is 1, and then 5 minus 3 is 2 over 8, which is 1/4. So let's think about our parabola, what happened here, so we can get our final answer. Now, which one of these is the actual answer? So what we want to do is think about, we have our 6-foot man, and we know he's our basketball player, because when x is 0, or I'm sorry, when t is 0, then we know that he started out at 6 feet. Let me erase this a second here. Okay, so we have a basketball player shooting a ball up to this point here where our basketball hoop is, and this is 10 feet high. Okay, so that is 10 feet. All right, so we know that we found the zeros here, and so we're going to have a 0 back here, so that's going to be our 1/4. And so our 1 is going to have to be on this side, okay? So our t is going to be the 1. So t equals 1. Okay, so time equals 1. Now remember, this problem, you'll have one similar to it, will be an extra credit problem on your test. So if you can solve it like this, that'll be perfect. Okay, I hope you guys have a great day and good luck studying. Bye.